Welcome back to another Diablo 4 video. So I've been playing Lightning Stormwolf for a little over a week now, and I think I'm comfortable enough with the build that I wanted to go ahead and put a in-depth build guide out, going over the skills, gear, Paragon, the mechanics of Lightning Storm, and then also how to play it in Nightmare Dungeons. Now, fair warning, this is a Tempest Roar build, so I want to go ahead and get that out of the way in the beginning. Now you know. So Lightning Storm reads, conjure a growing lightning storm that deals damage per strike. The number of strikes increase the longer the storm is channeled, up to a maximum of 5 at once, or potentially 6 if you take the Raging Lightning Storm modifier. And then with the first modifier, Enhanced Lightning Storm, the size of your lightning storm is preserved for 4 seconds after you stop channeling. So you're able to channel the storm up to your desired size, and then 4 seconds after that, you're able to tap the button. Now, we do have some wonky stuff going on with Lightning Storm, so I'll try to explain it here. So with spam clicking, you're actually able to cast Lightning Storm quicker than you would be able to with just holding it down and channeling it. So you can actually spam click it to get higher attacks per second than just channeling. Another thing too is, as you channel Lightning Storm up and you get more lightning strikes, the lightning strikes actually start to spread out, which can be very good AoE coverage, but against a single target isn't as good because you're not getting the lightning strikes to overlap with each other. So at 2 strikes, they're pretty much right on top of each other, so you can hit a single target with both. 3 strikes, they spread out a little bit more, but against the majority of bosses in Nightmare Dungeons with a decent-sized hitbox, you can hit them with all 3 strikes. So the sweet spot for single target typically is to get up to 3 strikes and then preserve that size, and then from there you just tap the button over and over again to DPS down a single target. As I'm running through a Nightmare Dungeon, I normally always channel all the way up to the maximum strikes possible, and I preserve that for the majority of the dungeon. Lightning Storm is going to be paired with Lightning Dancer's aspect. This reads, Lightning Storm critical strikes spawn 3 dancing bolts that seek enemies in the area, dealing lightning damage. This is a very high crit chance build, even guaranteeing crits at times, and this is kind of when you see the insane numbers happen in a big pack of enemies. This is tons of crits from Lightning Storm spawning dancing bolts going all over the place. So then we have everybody's favorite unique Tempest Roar. So on Lucky Hit, this allows storm skills to grant Spirit, but the main reason to run it is your base storm skills are now also werewolf skills. So Lightning Storm and our other storm skills will gain both the werewolf tag and the shape-shifting tag, which allows you to synergize both storm and werewolf through legendaries, through passives in the skill tree, and the Paragon board. So now that Lightning Storm is also a werewolf skill, we're able to run Grizzly Rage paired with the Dire Wolf's aspect. Typically, Grizzly Rage transforms you into a Dire Werebear. With Dire Wolves, it'll transform you into a Dire Werewolf instead. And you're going to gain movement speed, you're going to gain spirit cost reduction, and also kills will heal you for 10% of your maximum life. The idea is that we're trying to get as much cooldown reduction as possible while also extending the duration of Grizzly Rage to try to stay in this form as much as possible. While in Grizzly Rage form, you also get damage. You get stacking damage per second while you're in the form. You're unstoppable while in Grizzly Rage form, which means you are immune to crowd control. And you fortify for 8% of your base life per second while in Grizzly Rage. This is also paired with aspect of the Rampaging Werebeast. So this will increase the duration of Grizzly Rage by up to 5 seconds. But then in addition, critical strikes while in Grizzly Rage form will stack your crit damage up. And so you always want to be keeping this in mind. In the middle to the end of Grizzly Rage, you're going to be doing considerably more damage than you will be out of the form or at the very beginning of Grizzly Rage right after you've went into the form. For our key passive, we're running Earthen Might. So this typically only can be triggered by Earth skills, but with the Mighty Storm's aspect, our Storm skills can actually trigger Earthen Might for us. So this reads, damaging enemies with Earth skills, or Storm skills for us, has up to a 5% chance to restore all of your spirit and then guarantee critical strikes for 5 seconds. This chance is increased by 10% for critical strikes, 10% if the target is stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. Then we also have some of the highest chance to immobilize in any Druid build in the game. With also stacking Lucky Hit, we're able to proc Earthen Might pretty consistently. Next up, let's go over the skill tree. So for our basic skill, I'm currently running Storm Strike all the way to Fierce Storm Strike for the vulnerable chance. Now I've played around with both Wind Shear and Storm Strike. One of the big benefits of Lightning Storm is you can really cast the ability at max range. And so originally I was playing the build as a pretty much fully ranged caster build. And at that point, I was running Wind Shear. The added benefit of Storm Strike is obviously the 25% damage reduction built into the skill. And there are a lot of times where you have to get right into melee range, especially, against a suppressor elite, and enemies will charge you, jump on top of you, all kinds of stuff like that. Storm Strike comes in pretty clutch there. I'd say you could run either one. You don't necessarily even have to go all the way to Fierce Storm Strike. You have other ways to apply vulnerable in this build. So you could potentially just do 2 points here. And if you're running Wind Shear, you can just go for the 1 point to get the vulnerable chance with enhanced Wind Shear. Moving down, we've got maxed points into Lightning Storm, Enhanced Lightning Storm, and then Primal Lightning Storm for the immobilized chance. 1 point into Heart of the Wild so we can get up to Wild Impulses. This is going to increase our core skill damage while also making our core skills cost more spirit. We're reducing our spirit cost so much while in Grizzly Rage form that's pretty much irrelevant the majority of the time. We've got 3 points into Predatory Instinct for the critical strike chance against close enemies, and then 3 points for the movement speed here. Moving on, we've got 1 point into Cyclone Armor. You could potentially move points around to put an extra point here, and then 1 point into Preserving Cyclone Armor to intensify the non-physical damage reduction every so often. Currently, I only have 2 points in Blood Howl, so Blood Howl will heal you, but then also as you're killing enemies inside of a dungeon, you're going to reduce the cooldown of Blood Howl. You could potentially put a point into Innate Blood Howl if you feel like you're having spirit cost issues. From my testing, I don't think that attack speed really affects this build at all. It doesn't seem to affect the speed at which you channel Lightning Storm, and it doesn't really seem to affect how quickly you can click Lightning Storm to deal damage that way either. I could be wrong on that. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you've had a different experience. We're also running 1 point into Ancestral Fortitude. That's mainly to get over to Vigilance. 15% damage reduction for 6 seconds after using a defensive skill. Again, we have 2 of them. One of them being Blood Howl that's off cooldown constantly as you're killing enemies. Potentially another option you could go is Debilitating Roar with the aspect of the Dark Howl to make it a werewolf skill. Debilitating Roar is my favorite defensive skill. It's extremely powerful, and as I push higher, I've only done mid-70 Nightmare Dungeons. I may decide to go back to this at some point. I ran it for a good bit. My biggest issue with it is to really utilize it properly, it's a pretty big point investment. Every point that you put into Debilitating Roar reduces the cooldown. You can obviously get plus to Debilitating Roar on a chest piece. You can get 4 points there, which will reduce the cooldown. We also have some other things giving us plus points to our skills that could reduce it even further. So potentially you can get it down to under a 10-second cooldown. So then moving down, we do have 3 points in Nature's Reach. You deal 9% increased damage to distant enemies, double this bonus if they are slowed, stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. We're immobilizing and slowing a ton in this build, and I know that might sound kind of anti-synergistic with things like Predatory Instinct, but even if you're mostly hitting things in melee range, you have the dancing bolts from Lightning Dancer's aspect flying all over the place. You're going to be dealing damage at range sometimes. This is still a very good passive in my opinion, even if it isn't always active. One of the big strengths of Lightning Storm is the ability to get closer to enemies and deal damage or be at max range. I like Nature's Reach. You could also potentially drop this if you wanted to. So moving down, we've got 1 point in Hurricane, 1 point Enhanced Hurricane, and then a point into Savage Hurricane for the 20% less damage while Hurricane is active. Currently, my Hurricane is at about a 13.5 second cooldown, and it lasts for 9 seconds, so you'll have Hurricane up the majority of the time. This will also help with proccing lucky hits passively while you're dealing damage with Lightning Storm. So we've got 2 points in Elemental Exposure. This is going to be on Lucky Hit, a chance to apply Vulnerable to enemies. Each point you put into this gives you an extra second. We only have 2 points currently. You could easily put another point in here to extend the duration of the Vulnerable to 3 seconds. 2 points into Endless Tempest to increase the duration of Hurricane. 3 points into Bad Omen. On Lucky Hit, a 30% chance when dealing damage to a vulnerable, immobilized, or stunned enemy that a lightning bolt also hits, dealing 55% weapon damage. We've also got 3 points into Electric Shock. On Lucky Hit, dealing lightning damage to enemies has up to a 15% chance to immobilize them for 3 seconds. If the target is already immobilized, the lightning damage dealt to them is increased by 18% instead. Moving down, we've got 1 point into Neurotoxin. Poison enemies are slowed by 8%. This is how we are slowing in the build. 1 point into Toxic Claws. Critical strikes with werewolf skills deal 8% of their base damage as poisoning damage over 4 seconds. Again, with Tempest Roar, our Hurricane and our Lightning Storm are both werewolf skills that are able to proc Toxic Claws. Then we've got Envenom. Poisoned enemies take 30% additional critical strike damage. Again, poisoning with Toxic Claws to get this increased critical strike damage. We've got 3 points in Defiance. Nature magic skills deal 12% increased damage to elites. Natural Disaster. Your storm skills deal 12% increased damage to enemies that are stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. And then we've got 3 points into Grizzly Rage. Grizzly Rage itself, Prime Grizzly Rage for the Unstoppable, and then Supreme Grizzly Rage for the Fortify. And then, as we've already talked about, our key passive is Earthen Might. Next up, let's take a look at the gear. Now, I will have a build link in the info section of this video with all the correct stats and all the different pieces of gear. So for the helmet, we are running the Tempest Roar like we've already discussed. For the chest piece, you want a high damage reduction life chest piece. We're running Vigorous here for the damage reduction while shapeshifted into a werewolf. For the gloves, we have Mighty Storm's Aspect here with ranks to Lightning Storm, Lucky Hit chance, Critical Strike chance. The attack speed on my pair of gloves is pretty useless. I would rather have Willpower here. Something else you could do is get Storm Skill cooldown reduction to get higher uptime on Hurricane. For the pants, again, you want a ton of damage reduction here. We're running Disobedience to get more armor. For the boots, we're running Storm Shifter's Aspect. This gives you +2 ranks to your shape-shifting skills while Hurricane is active. So this will apply to our Lightning Storm, giving us more damage. Here, you definitely want movement speed. I've got damage reduction while injured, Fortified Generation, and then instead of Intelligence, prefer to have armor while shape-shifted into a werewolf. For the weapon, the 2 most important stats are vulnerable damage and willpower, and then you just want a high DPS weapon. For the totem, cooldown reduction is going to be your most important stat. Lucky Hit chance is very good. Crit Strike chance is good as well. You can also get damage reduction while fortified and damage reduction from poisoned enemies. For rings, your stats are going to be vulnerable damage, Lucky Hit chance, Critical Strike chance. And then that 4th stat could either be a damage stat or maximum life. Here we have Overcharged Aspect imprinted. When this procs, it does insane damage, and it actually is best to imprint it from the codex. The damage done actually scales with your character level. So every couple levels, you can actually re-imprint this to get more damage. On the second ring, we have Rampaging Werebeast imprinted here. And then for the amulet, we have Dire Wolves. This is going to give us more movement speed and spirit cost reduction being on the amulet. Most important stats are cooldown reduction. You want +3 ranks to an offensive passive. Your best bet is going to be in Venom. I have Wild Impulses. That's a decent runner-up, but in Venom is going to be the best. And then from there, you can get damage reduction. You can get armor while shapeshifted into a werewolf here as well. For gems, you want armor gems in your jewelry. Crit strike damage against vulnerable enemies in your weapons. And then damage reduction while fortified in your armor. Or you could go for rubies to get more maximum life. For Sprit Boons, we're going to take Wariness for 10% reduced damage from elites in the Deer section. For Eagle, we're going for Scythe Talons, 5% increased critical strike chance. If you feel like you need it, you could also go for the maximum life. For Wolf, we're going for Calamity. This will extend the duration of our Grizzly Rage. In Snake, we're taking 2. We're going with Masochistic. Critical strikes with shapeshifting skills heal you for 3% maximum life. Then we're also running Calm Before the Storm. On Lucky Hit, your nature magic skills have up to a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 2 seconds. Next up, let's take a look at the Paragon tree. Now, the entire tree will be, again, in the planner in the info section of the video. We're just going to talk about the most important stuff real quick. So on the first board, we're taking Fulminate, lightning damage. You can also put Exploit here for vulnerable chance early on if you don't have a lot of glyph sockets unlocked yet. Moving into the Lust for Carnage board, we take Lust for Carnage for more spirit back on critical strikes with werewolf skills. We're also putting the werewolf glyph here. We're also getting the Thunderstruck board for more critical strike damage. You also can get some extra vulnerable damage in this cluster here. Going over to the right, we have the Heightened Malice board. We're taking Earth and Sky here to buff our magic nodes, mainly buffing the damage reduction from poisoned enemies. Moving down to Heightened Malice itself, we get more damage if there are 3 or more poisoned enemies nearby. Your next board is going to be Constricting Tendrils, or mainly just taking the glyph here and then pathing through. This is where you're going to put Exploit. So the next, I would actually go ahead and go down to the Ancestral Guidance board. We're just quickly going down through here to get the Spirit on Kill and then the Ancestral Guidance node for more damage after spinning Spirit. And then from there, you'd go back into the Thunderstruck board up here, grab the glyph socket. We're going to put Keeper here. We get increased non-physical damage, and then it also buffs all rare nodes within radius, and the main one we're trying to buff is the damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. This will give us 10% increased damage reduction there. So that's going to about wrap it up, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.